Thanks for coming. Thanks for Sonic Act for inviting me and letting me presenting this film. I might just introduce the work briefly, and then we could look at it and talk about the process maybe, or the project was co-directed with a friend and colleague of mine, David Bryant. We first heard about, well, I was aware that there was people that were hypersensitive to electromagnetic field. Generally speaking, some people can't tolerate even electricity. But we heard about people getting sick from microwave. So everything that has to do with cell phone communication and Wi-Fi, and doing research, we came across this region in the United States. They called it's in West Virginia, and there's a place over there in the mountain where they do astronomy, and they have these telescope, and to listen to space, they need a complete zone of silence, radio wave silence, so we decided to go down there. Well, so that radio quiet zone is one of the rare places in North America where there is still civilization, and there's controlled amount of electromagnetic wave. So it became a bit of a refuge for people suffering from that. So the project was a bit of we did it a bit as in a classic documentary approach. We went down there and met people. We interviewed 9 different people, ended up using the voice of 2 women, and went back. We went there 3 times on a period of 2.5 years, and made the piece. So I guess maybe we could just watch the film and talk some more after.
When I was little, I thought that the sound of a plane passing overhead was the sound of the sun passing through the sky on its way down to the horizon. These are the thoughts that we grow up with. It's strange to learn later on that that was the sound of a plane. Not the sound of a sun. Driving through West Virginia once. Something about the mountains. You could feel the people who had lived on those mountains. You could feel the mountains themselves, the trees. You could hear them all singing. Used to be afraid of lightning. hide from it. Then I remember walking in the night once through the woods, and it was pouring rain and lightning. And I reached out to touch a tree, and I could feel the electricity running all through the tree. It's strange to feel electricity like a substance pouring all over you. Sometimes you want to wash it away, but you can't.
I told my friends about my problem because I couldn't go to their houses and watch television. I couldn't play Scrabble anymore. Or if I did, we had to make sure we cut things off, move the lamps. I'm sure they got tired of hearing about it. But one of them told me about something she'd seen on television, something about a radio quiet zone. And I started to explore what this place was. It was deep in the hills of West Virginia, and it seemed like it might be the right thing because there was a giant telescope there that listened to sounds, radio signals coming from outer space. And in order to do that, it needed radio quiet. It needed not to have any interference from signals here on Earth. And so you weren't supposed to use your cell phones in the area. You weren't supposed to have Wi-Fi. You weren't supposed to have anything that might interfere with this listening capability of this giant telescope. So I phoned people who lived there. I talked to people. It seemed like it might be the place. There were no guarantees, but I knew that other people were coming there. There was, in fact, a woman who was attempting to set up some sort of refuge there. I'm trying to think now about how I first found a name for this syndrome. I think it was by accident, but I came across the term electrical sensitivity, and there are lots of different names for it. Electrical hypersensitivity. It's some sort of syndrome, obviously, because it's not an illness where you can find some sort of pathogenic organism. It's just a collection of symptoms related to exposure to certain fields. And these fields are invisible, obviously. They're odorless, tasteless, but the idea that we're not affected by them is bizarre. Of course we're going to be affected by them. If you think about our bodies, we're electrical creatures. Our hearts operate on tiny pulses of electricity. Everything about us is electrical. And to expose us to fields that never before in human history have we been exposed to and expect us to tolerate them is bizarre in itself. I've done a lot of reading about electromagnetic fields and their effects, and for a long time the Defense Department has been working on weapons that use radiation to immobilize individuals without actually killing them, although of course it can kill you if it's strong enough. So there's absolutely no doubt that these are dangerous. When this first began to happen to me, I didn't have a name for it. It was as if the molecules in my body were just racing around, running around energetically, just as if they'd been activated some way, some artificial way. And it was just very, very uncomfortable. And then there was also a certain feeling of agitation, because you feel exhausted. You feel as if maybe those molecules were racing around and they got tired.
I think a lot about loneliness. How everything is lonely. The trees reaching their branches out to the sky. The stars reaching out their burning light. It's hard in the city. You can't feel the stars so much. You're blotted out, except for the brightest ones. But they have to shine so hard to get through the light of the city that by the time they reach you, they're tired.
I've had to try to escape, really. It sounds overly dramatic to say that, because so many people are what I would call real refugees, having to leave countries because of political oppression. But in a sense, I found myself a refugee because I had to sell the house that I love, the house where I'd lived for 22 years, because my neighbor had Wi-Fi. I had a fellow who worked on my computers, and he was really curious as to what might be bothering me. So he brought over some of his mechanical devices and turned them on, and he measured an enormously high, strong Wi-Fi signal that was coming from my neighbor. The entire electromagnetic spectrum, no matter what frequency it is no respecter of property rights. It just comes across our property lines as if it had every right to do so. And obviously it does, according to our laws. But what it did was to drive me out of my house. I had to sell it and move, and then began a sort of, I don't know, I felt like a vagabond looking for some place that I could endure. They call it the quiet zone because other people are prevented from having cell phones and devices that produce radio frequency radiation. But the observatory is not prevented, and that was immediately my reaction. I got out of the car, and within 30 seconds I said, it's no good here. And then I got out my meter, and in fact it was worse than where I'd left. I came down to this valley, and it was wonderful. When you turned, you probably noticed the old farmhouse there on the left, the white one. That's where I lived when I came down here. And I rented that farmhouse and lived in it for 18 months. I was looking for property the whole time. I couldn't find any, and ironically found it right across the road from the farmhouse, more or less. And they promised me, I mean, I wasn't stupid. I went to the planning commission and said, you know, is there going to be a cell tower there? And they said, oh no, they said there will never be a cell tower there. So of course there is one. And the minute they turned it on, well, my life here was ruined. People say, well, what are you going to do? And there's a certain part of me that just doesn't know. But I think that I will probably buy some sort of van or something that I can travel in. And I don't know, try to find some place that's safe.
So it's quite a story we got there, and you can really see some perhaps resonance with this earlier presentation today about trying to find bits of dark sky or unpolluted regions of the sky. Hello. So it seems very much that these people are in a sense refugees, as she mentioned. So how did it feel for you, like going into this community or this very specific community as you're making the film?
What's the question, sir?
How did you feel going into these communities or this one specific community in
I guess there was this thing first where going there, we didn't know what to expect. We didn't know what kind of people we would meet. And the shock, I guess, was to meet people who were going through. The pain was real, and we've screened the film a few times before, and the reaction sometimes is people asking, "Is it real? Is it not real? Is it psychosomatic?" Just maybe to go back a little bit, this syndrome, it's recognized in Sweden as a illness, and there's been some serious research done by Dr. Olofsson. But really, the rest of the world sees it as a mental illness, and there's very, very few help these people can get, and they're pretty much on their own. And going there and listening to all these stories, the project was a short film, but we could have made, many of these portraits, I guess, for different stories. And they were solid, intelligent people that, they had to leave in most cases, they had to leave their family, they had to leave their house, they had to leave their job. And they were living in pretty serious condition in the woods for some of them, basically camping, trying to get away from all of this. So is it real? Is it not real? That's the part where there is this simple fact that being around these microwave made them sick, and being away from them, they felt better. So yeah, it was, maybe to answer the question, it was quite a journey to, yeah, hear those.
But was there some kind of, so collective support structures that they had, or was it more isolated people that were treated as crazy by those around them? Or?
Yeah, well, there's, I guess, there was at first there was a woman who moved there, and she did a lot of research, and she has a website, and she kind of welcomed people who suffer from that syndrome as well, and help them out, find places, as you know. She tried her best anyway to help people who wants to move there and get better. And as it's mentioned in the film, like around the actual observatory, there's a lot of radio frequency there, so it's really more in the surrounding of the zone that there's actual an actual quiet. There's actual quiet spaces.
So how large is this zone?
Pardon?
How large is the zone?
I don't know exactly how large it is, but it's a total of something like 15, 20 towns altogether. It's quite large, but there's zone within the zone, and the observatory actually have they have a wave police. People driving around with pickup truck and equipment, and to detect what are the interference they're reading in the telescope. And when we got there, we did a visit at the observatory, and they were telling us a story that they had a Dolorama that had just changed their door, and it was an automatic door with the l'œil magique, it's in French. I don't know what's the exact word, but they forced them to change the door because living in that zone, you have to follow certain rules, and you're not allowed to do interference.
So you seem to be focusing much more on the perhaps chemical processes rather than electrical processes with the way you're presenting the film.
Yeah, for people who are not familiar with my work, I've been working a lot with end processing and intervention onto the film itself. It's first time I was using human voice in a project, and as I mentioned before, I see that this project is a traditional documentary in a way. So of course, using my tool, I used a different alternative photography technique, and I came across this recipe, and I liked it very much in a way that it's almost like a rotoscopy, where rotoscopy in French, anyway, where it was, yeah, something happened, and for me to kind of manage to make the invisible visible in a way. Where it's not, I'm not erasing everything. It makes everything kind of pulse, and I don't know. So that was the approach visually. I wish my colleague David was here to talk about the sound as well. But then he did field recording over there. We did the interview together, but yeah. So we started the sound and image. We started the collaboration right from the beginning.
So it's very much co-directed between the two of you.
Exactly, yeah. Well, right at first when we proposed the project to the National Film Board, I proposed something they had never done. I insisted that it would be, even though he was going to take care of all the audio and music and sound effect, that he would be co-director, and it was a bit of an open laboratory. We didn't know exactly how that would work, but just like traditionally, the way they were working over there, music was coming in the end and placed on the image. And so that was a proposal, and then they accepted. So that was very nice to, straight from the beginning, kind of write the film together and have that luxury of, go through the process from the beginning, like I said.
So the sound was quite an important aspect of this presentation. But say of the people you interviewed or talked to during the production, I presume you showed some of them the film afterwards. How did they react to what they saw as your interpretation of their
Actually, not yet. We just managed to get in touch with Nicole again, and it's not easy to reach them because they don't have a telephone. They live in houses with no electricity, and it was funny because we knew she was going to go in a small town in Maine in the fall, and so we had the name of the town, and we didn't know if she had moved there yet or not. And David tried something. He just called the local library, and he was talking to the clerk, and he asked her if she knew this woman, and she said, like, yeah, she comes here often. And we left a message for her, and she called us back. So the idea was to go soon and show her the film. Not sure exactly how yet, but we'll see.
Yeah, so there's going to be perhaps some elaborate 18th century technology that doesn't emit too much radiation.
And actually, that was an interesting part for the process, to film with mechanical camera and manage to film longer and get closer in a way. But still, the sound equipment was bothering her. We couldn't do very long session. We had to stop, and she was actually losing her voice. It was one of the symptoms, I guess. I don't know if there's maybe question or. I don't know.
Yeah, if there's anyone who has a quick question, there's a microphone down here just by the front. Or you can maybe pass this microphone out. Oh, no, this
Well, it's a simple question which immediately comes to mind when you think about electromagnetic radiation. Why don't these people just build a Faraday cage?
Why would they do what? Sorry, I didn't hear.
Why don't they build a Faraday cage into their house, or buy a tinfoil hat, or perhaps I saw last year an aluminum burqa, and perhaps that's a solution.
Well, funny you say that, because most of them do it. We met this. There was a woman living in the zone. She was from London, and the way it started happening for her is that they built a cell phone tower next to her condo, and seems like the main ray was passing through her house, and she became very ill. And one thing she started doing was putting foil paper everywhere, ceiling, walls. Every room. She was trying to, that was kind of the last thing she did before she sold the place and moved to the States.
Did it help at all?
Pardon?
Did it help at all?
Seems like it does, yeah. One of them also, what she did was like building a bit of a cage around her bed with, aluminum and all this. And we saw a picture. It was, it must be very strange to live in there, and and it makes sense that to move somewhere else, to find somewhere safe where you don't have to put yourself in a aluminum cage. It's
So maybe another question, but we'll still have a discussion after the next presentation if there's no urgent questions.
I have one.
Oh, okay. Please.
Okay, you said there was already some research done on this. Is there any indication what is causing this symptom?
If I have indication to where to look, or
No, just whether you know what kind of research has been done onto what is causing this, or what kind of difference they have physically, these people?
Well, I guess that's one thing, though. We did research. We found the subject very appealing, but I do not pretend to understand scientifically what's going on, and just the list of symptoms. Like it's very, very long. It affects people in very different ways. Some people are more tolerant than others, and why are they affected by that? It's like, why is there people in the world that are allergic to peanuts, for example? Like why some people can just eat 5 peanut butter toast and be totally fine, and just a little bit of it can kill somebody. Like I don't know if it answer your question, but
I presume if you're looking for specific research, if it's considered to be a medical condition in Sweden, they must have some background there somehow.
Definitely, yeah. But then it's this thing as well where when, like, it's been the people we met, like they've been to so many clinics and met so many doctors, and nobody can point exactly what it was. It took a while for them to understand that it could have been that, and we're talking about sometime up to 10 years of struggles. There's this architect woman we met from Texas. She went all the way to India to go and see if alternative medicine could fix her up. And she tried many, many things, and turned out that she finally heard of this condition and tried to isolate it herself from those, electromagnetic wave fields. And it worked, and it was her conclusion that it had to be this. But then those clinics, when they go and do tests, like there's so many machines producing electromagnetic fields that it's very complicated. It's hard to put your finger on it.
I just think that I can stay in this room, but I get tired from it. I think everybody would get tired from the electromagnetic radiation. I don't understand else. But I think it's not a complete tool, but meditation, it surely enforces your electric field. So I think if I have time to meditate, my aura, whatever you call it, gets stronger, and I can stand more. But
So on that note, let's go over to empty set.
Thank you.